So tonight we're going to start out and we're going to talk to you a little bit about our first forays into this area, which we conducted about 2 years ago with what we call the Adult Social Knowledge or ASK workshop, and I'm going to talk to you about that. Then Tasha's going to describe to you the Access program, which was funded by the UC Davis Behavioral Health Center of Excellence and was actually a much more extensive trial. And finally, we're going to have Steve talk to you about some of the issues that have come up as we've worked concurrently with children and young adult children and their parents during this period. So I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here when I tell you that adults with autism can still exhibit poor social and vocational outcomes. This has been it's been found multiple times in the literature. They also, unfortunately, frequently experience a very high burden of health and mental health issues as they go through the lifespan. Older research suggests that they also report low levels of life satisfaction. And a new group of camp of research has started to call this all disengagement from adult roles. So they don't, as typically developing individuals do, get jobs kind of in early adulthood into late adulthood. They don't necessarily become able to live independently. They don't continue to have fulfilling interpersonal relationships necessarily, and they tend to become increasingly disengaged in the community. This is not every person, but the trend is that this is what's happening. And you know, obviously, given the tsunami, as you've probably heard it referred to in the popular press, of adults with autism we now have transitioning to adulthood, there were really, really few empirically supported interventions to help this group of individuals. So because of that, we decided about 3 years ago that we really wanted to extend our socialization intervention curriculum up to help more with adults. So we went to the research literature, and it was actually the research literature on chronic mental illness, because that literature's been around a lot longer. People had developed curricula and had studied them. And we came upon something called Functional Adaptive Skills Training, or FAST, which was empirically validated and manualized, so we could use it, and it was meant to teach life skills. We also used some of the things that we had learned from our socialization program. So we had learned a lot about how important it is to help people develop interpersonal relationships in order to make intervention effective. And so we incorporated things from there. Plus, we wanted to, we know that there's a piece of folk wisdom out there that says that individuals with autism are really good with computers. So we wanted to use Android tablets to try to teach organizational skills. So in our pre-pilot study, we used kind of a boardroom type of presentation for the adults. We didn't want them to feel like they were being babied in any way, and they liked that format. We introduced the Android tablets. We tried to help them with transition-oriented goal setting, so we had them set goals and we tried to help them track goals. We helped them go on group outings, and we had them involved in planning the group outings. We made sure that in every session there was a lot of time for social interaction to build those bonds that I mentioned were so important for really getting a lot out of the curriculum. And then we also included a concurrent parent program where we leveraged Steve's the resources of the UCED, University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, that Steve is part of. He had a series of lectures for community about independent living, vocational training, and so we had parents go to those. We initiated the pilot. It was a fee-for-service program in 13 participants, most of whom had autism. They were ages 18 to 24. A lot of them were Alta California Regional Center clients, and 40% of the individuals had been through our social skills program. We took all comers with respect to intellectual ability level, so we had a quarter of the individuals, met criteria for intellectual disability, and then over half of them, however, had IQs in the average or better range. We taught them planning and organizing. We taught them social skills and interpersonal communication. And then we gave them some lessons on work and community engagement. That included a job interview and some talks about the unwritten rules of work. And we did, this wasn't a control group study, so it was just a one-group study, which isn't the tightest experimental design, but it's pretty good for a little trial. And we found that we improved the participants' perceptions of their own organizational skills. So that was exciting for us. We also saw it had what we call a large effect size, but in a small sample it's hard to show a lot of statistical change. But we did show a large effect size for reduction in depression. We conducted focus groups after the training, and we found that our young adults really liked meeting others and experiencing camaraderie, getting out of their comfort zone, they actually reported, and doing things that were different than routine. They thought they got helped with organizational skills, and they really liked, we did a lot of discussion of interpreting social situations. They liked that. Surprisingly to us, they don't like technology necessarily. So this is very bifurcated kind of an issue. Some people, and I see some people that I know in the audience whose kids really do love technology, or some individuals who love technology, but others really hate technology and actually would complain, I'm purely a Linux user and this is an Android. I do not like this at all. So they also couldn't figure out, we didn't do a good enough job of giving them each other's phone numbers. They couldn't figure out how to use the tablets to communicate with each other. It was actually very, very interesting to us. It was very challenging to teach people how to use the technology in a group setting. But other people thought that the groups were not advanced enough. Our parents reported they really liked the connections and support. They also liked Steve Reuter, sitting here in the front row. They didn't like the fact, interestingly, that we really particularly tried to give the young adult participants some independence from their parents, so we didn't always tell the parents exactly everything that went on in the group. They did not like that. They wanted to be able to contact each other, and they wanted to get to know all the other young adults. But basically, the children, I didn't say, they reported they really liked the group. The parents reported that they felt that the children had gotten a lot out of the group, more out of the group than social skills. He didn't like the tablet, but he enjoyed planning outings, and it made me hopeful about the future, and it's reassuring to see how well others are doing. Some reported that their children were more relaxed in social situations, their overall demeanor was more relaxed, and that they loved coming to the program, and that others reported that people had become more independent through the use of the Wunderlist, which was one of the organizational programs we taught, and calendaring. We taught Google Calendar in that group. So, and we ended up thinking that we were on the right track, helping people to build interpersonal connections, changing their own perceptions of organizational skills was a good thing, and we felt it was good. People were pretty highly satisfied. But we needed to work on the technology piece. We also found that working with kids who had intellectual disability, but then kids that also had extremely high IQs, made having discussions kind of difficult because there were so many levels represented in the group. And that, parents and young adults were not always working well as a unit. That was something we observed. And also that many of the young adult members were very anxious and withdrawing from adult roles. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Oswald, who's going to talk to you more about the changes we made with Access.
Thank you, Marjorie. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'll be focusing more on the next phase of our research, which was the Access program. And I'll talk to you about the design as well as some of our research findings from it. So Marjorie ended her talk by talking about how we noticed anxiety was really pivotal in this group, and it was impacting their ability to move forward and advance into adulthood. And this is not surprising given that anxiety is actually one of the most common clinical problems among children as well as adults with autism. And really, it became clear to us that anxiety can interfere with this transition to adulthood. We looked into the literature and found that cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, has been used to treat anxiety in many different populations. More recently, it's been used to treat anxiety in children with ASD, and there's just some preliminary studies coming out that's showing it's effective as well for adults with autism. So the goals of the current intervention were really to promote engagement. And as remember kind of that key word Marjorie was talking about, engagement in different adult roles by providing adults with skills to cope with the natural stressors that come up in their life. And oftentimes, transitioning, any kind of transition, there's anxiety. So we really wanted to help them cope with these transitions in life by providing them with skills. Also, we wanted to provide them with additional skills to develop and maintain social relationships with peers. Once they detach from high school, there's often a drop-off in how often they're able to interact with people and see people. So we really wanted them to understand the importance of friendships and start to promote that more in their adult life. And then we also wanted to provide them with additional information that would help them stay organized and plan and set goals to reach their goals in adult life. And lastly, this Access program was a bit different than the first one Marjorie presented on, which was called Ask, because this time we had a concurrent parent group, but they were given the same material as the participants with autism. But in addition to that, we also gave them skills in how to coach their adult child with autism. And Steve is going to focus on that portion of the talk about the adult parents. So Access program, we've been throwing around this word. It has a very long, it's a long acronym. So acquiring career, coping, executive control, and social skills. So that's what Access stands for. I just first wanted to break down the structure of the Access program. So we met every week for an hour and a half. The sessions lasted 20 weeks. There was one leader for the adult group, the adults with autism, and then there were several co-leaders that helped. And the co-leaders played an important function of modeling different skills, doing fun role plays, and helping the participants engage in small group activities. So a typical schedule, let's say you come to group one day, and first you would start off in our group with the review of what we covered last week. We really wanted sort of that continuity to understand we're building upon the curriculum each week. So we provided a quick review of the prior week, and then we went over life practice. So life practice essentially is homework they did at home, and they did it in conjunction with their social coach. And this was really for them to start utilizing the skills that they're learning in group in their everyday life. We didn't want them to feel like this is school and they have the mentality of, I learn it there and I leave it there. We really want them to bring these skills into the world, into their everyday lives. Then next, what we would do in the lesson is we would cover the new topic for that day, and usually we would share a snack as well. And then towards the end, we would often do some sort of activity, whether that be a role play. They might get up in front of the audience and present on the topic. So we did various activities. And then lastly, we would end by explaining the upcoming life practice that they had to do that week. So we really emphasized working as a group. We did that in multiple ways. One was we met as a large group. So on any given day, there was about 13 adults with autism in the room. And so we really collectively worked together. We supported each other. We encouraged each other. We shared together. And that was really important because in that sharing process, they were helping the other group members feel validated. Oftentimes the group members who came in at the start said, no one's experienced what I've experienced, I feel alone, I feel isolated, and 20 weeks later they feel like, wow, people get me, others have shared these experiences, so they're not so alone feeling anymore. And they really did learn from each other. And we started the group by helping them understand what constructive feedback is, because we really wanted the environment to feel supported. And the great thing, too, about working in a group, it's natural opportunities every week to socially interact and develop further social skills. And a really fun part of this group, too, is that there were some lasting friendships that were developed from the group. And as we all know, friendships are developed based on, over time, slowly disclosing more and more about yourself and really bonding with the individual. And that's inherently what this group does. So each week, so 6 days out of the week, they were to complete the life practice assignments. And again, as I said, it's really to help prepare them for the real world and to start utilizing the skills they're learning in group and applying them to their everyday lives. And then their social coach, they selected. For most participants, it was a parent. Occasionally, it was a spouse or a close relative, like an aunt. And again, Steve will focus much more on the parent part or the social coach part, but really they were there to learn the same material so that they can help ensure that the participants starting to utilize it in their everyday lives. So I know this is very, the text might be a little bit small under schedule, but I just want you to see kind of the breakdown of the lessons. So first we started off with foundational concepts. That was the first 4 lessons. We did an overview at the beginning, and then within the first session, we actually have everyone in the group stand up and give a very small presentation about themselves. So right away, we're pushing them. And you would be surprised, every single group we've led, it's been impressive how well everyone's done. And it's immediately bonding people, because one, they're learning about each other, and we ask them to talk about their strengths, and also to talk about a challenge. So they're already disclosing a little. And a lot of them recognize, like, wow, I'm not the only one who reported I was bullied. Others around said that same thing for a challenge. So it was really a great bonding, and we're already starting to push them a little bit in the group, which is one of our goals, is to help them inch away from their comfort zone and grow. And then they also, we focus on different important skills that we think are foundational, like active listening and being able to receive feedback positively. And then we next moved on to the coping with negative situations, feelings, and thoughts. So this was a lot about stress coping. So there's many different aspects to that, and I'll go over some of the examples of that in a minute. But it was really about being able to identify when you're stressed or anxious or have other negative feelings, and then how to cope with that. The third section was really on building relationships. And we focused primarily on friendships and understanding what the purpose of a friend is, and how there are different phases where you start off as an acquaintance and it develops into maybe a casual friend and then a close friend. And we explain kind of the different aspects of those relationships. And then lastly, we focused more on work-related matters. We talked about being able to receive feedback from your boss. That's really important, to be able to take that, utilize what they say, and try to change your behavior, but also not let that negatively affect you and get bummed out or quit because of it, and really give them some skills around that. We talked about disclosure, so disclosing your disability or your impairments at work and other settings. We also talked about workplace culture, especially around social expectations in the workplace. And then we ended by playing a fun game of Family Feud. And so what I'm representing here is really kind of the development of the lessons. So we ran 3 groups, and we learned from each group. So this is kind of the evolution of it here. Now I wanted to just present to you some of the actual slides participants saw in the program. So this is called social circles. This is one of the introductory concepts, and we carried throughout the lessons. And it was really to start explaining to them that, there are people in our lives who we're not close to. We don't disclose personal information about ourselves to them. And you have to be careful what you say to them, such as strangers or maybe your boss or professor. And we explain how there's sort of these rings of people or circles, and as you get closer to, so me is at the bottom here in orange, and if you kind of think strangers is the far outer, you kind of are working your way in toward who's closest to you in your life. So we tried to, whenever we could, use visual metaphors to explain complex concepts. And then we use this to really encourage some conversation about how much personal information you should share with people depending on what circle they're in. We also talked about how those circles relate to the strength and the nature of a specific relationship. And also the consequences of breaking rules. You can break a rule with a close family member, but if you do that same thing with your boss or your teacher, you might get fired, or you might get kicked out of your school. So just understanding how consequences are really contingent upon who you're with and what social circle they're in. So then we moved into that next section, which we talked about the negative situations, feelings, and thoughts. And so we use this to represent physical feelings someone might experience when they're feeling anxious or maybe when they're feeling depressed. And a lot of times, even most people find it difficult to recognize in the moment what they're feeling and what emotion it's related to. So this is really to help kind of create that connection between what's going on in your body and what's going on in your mind. And then as part of the anxiety lessons, we talked about thinking traps. So thinking traps are basically unrealistic thinking, We all have done this, but some people tend to do it much more than others, and the more you do it, usually the more anxious you tend to be in life. So what we really want to do is make sure they're sort of regulating how often they're falling into these thinking traps. So we gave them different examples. For instance, the big bad trap. This is when you only see the negative in a situation and you ignore the positive. So as a good example, imagine your boss is doing their annual review and they're commenting. They tell you 20 things you did right and they say one thing you need to work on. And you walk away and all you heard is that one bad thing. You're terrible, you're a horrible person, and you go on and on. So that's kind of what we discuss with them, is really like getting them to see, are you using any of these thinking traps in your everyday life? Worst case scenario, we've all been there. So you believe the worst thing possible is going to happen, okay? So, oh no, because my boss said that one negative thing, I'm gonna get fired, I'm never gonna get a job again, and you just kind of blow it out of proportion. The strict judge trap. So this is when you have unrealistic rules about how things should be. So you're telling people, you should do it this way, you can never break this rule. A lot of this is kind of common thinking, really, specifically in people with autism. So kind of helping them to think more flexibly about things. Future failure trap. So this is, if you're not successful one time, you assume thereafter you'll never be good at that. So you try to play the piano once. And obviously you're learning, so you don't do well, but you walk away thinking, I'll never learn. I'll never be able to play piano because of this. So kind of getting them to reevaluate the way they think about themselves. And then the blame game. So this is when they're blaming others for problems in their life, or maybe they blame themselves much too much when not everything is their responsibility. So we have them identify these different thinking traps in themselves. And we talk to them about how these thinking traps really make them feel anxious and discouraged or depressed. And what that ends up doing is it leads them to not try out new things, right? If you think you're gonna fail, why even try again? So you can see how these sorts of thoughts can lead them not to really transition into adulthood, because it's too scary. There's too many obstacles or challenges to face. We also, as a part of it, anxiety, wanted to explain to them that avoidance can be a go-to reaction. We've all done this at times when we're really nervous or anxious. We're like, well, I'm really afraid of what I'm going to get when I pick up that phone and I hear what the doctor's going to tell me. I'm just not going to pick up the phone. I just don't want to hear the message. So basically, we talk about avoidance and how they might be using it in their life to avoid growing. And so we talk about how they might make excuses, or they might try to distract themselves by doing something else than what they should be doing. Just flat out refusing to do something is avoidance. Hiding. Quite literally, you might be hiding in a room, but also just dodging, not picking up the phone, things like that. Procrastinating. Probably everyone in here has procrastinated to avoid something, right? Melting down. This still happens sometimes in adults with autism. It's just the stress builds so much, they just kind of melt down. Okay, and taking it out on others. You're just so built up, so anxious, you might turn around and just start yelling at someone. So we talk about how these are all ways to really avoid and face the challenges in their life. So we give them this visual to explain how avoidance really moves them away from their life goals. But approach is what moves them towards their life goals. And then we give them skills on how to approach. So some really fundamental skills are about using relaxation. So belly breathing, muscle relaxation techniques, going to your peaceful place in your mind, or doing other things like listening to music, taking walks. So we talk to them about really finding relaxation tools that work for them. And this is not a one-size-fits-all, so that's part of what we do, is we present many different types to help them find what works for them. And they're using those relaxation tools when they're feeling really anxious in life, but then we also talk about these thinking traps and how you can overcome them. And so we talked about the worst, best, and most likely case tool. So this is where you identify what's that worst case thing you're really worried about. Then let's go to the other extreme. What's the best possible thing that could happen, okay? And then we say, now let's bring it in some. What's most likely going to happen, okay? So we're getting them to really rethink most might just go straight to the bad, the negative, but is that really gonna happen? And kind of sway them more into the more realistic zone. And I really like this quote by Einstein, which he already was using CBT, I think. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, okay? So we're getting them to sort of reframe their own thoughts. And then we would usually have a slide up every week or so that was a reflection slide, and we asked them, to really reflect on a question. So in this case, we asked them, we gave them a scenario about being nervous and raising their hand, and then we had them work through using this tool. Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen if you raise your hand? What's the best? What's the most likely scenario? So that was really the anxiety part, and then we moved on to more of the social skills lessons. And we created this imagery to explain that there are different stages to a conversation. There's the approach stage, so introducing yourself or walking up to someone. Then there's the taking turns in a conversation stage. And then lastly, there's the stage of exiting, politely exiting. So we each week focus on one of those lessons. We also cover the friendship continuum under the social skills part of the curriculum. So really explaining the difference between an acquaintance, casual friend, and close friend, and how each type of friend can be enjoyable, but friendships can change over time. So an acquaintance might become a close friend, but let's say they move out of state and you haven't talked to them in 5 years. Is that still your best friend? Kind of explaining to them friendships change over time. And then we also discussed how people typically have more acquaintances than close friends. Wouldn't that be overwhelming if you had 50 close friends? That's too many calls to deal with on a given week, right? But the importance of having a couple close friends you can trust and turn to. And then we also explained that friendships take time. A lot of them thought you kind of jumped straight to the end in your best friends, but it really is an evolution that usually takes years. And then we talked about disclosure, so disclosing a disability. And you don't have to necessarily say, I have autism, but you can say, hey, you might say this to your boss or a coworker, it's hard for me to remember or fully understand verbal instructions. Would you please give me written instructions when you want me to do a task? So these are simple things to kind of know where your impairments lie and figure out a way to explain that to someone so they understand how to accommodate you in different settings, such as work or in school. Okay, so just, I wanted to quickly end with the results. So those were the different phases of the curriculum. And we had 41 participants aged 18 to 38, average to above average IQ, all had confirmed autism diagnoses. We had participants who were grouped either into the treatment group who received the intervention right away or the control group who received it later on, a few months later. And then the social coaches reported that their adult children with autism really showed improvements in adaptive home living skills. So cleaning, property maintenance, food preparation, chores, really important life skills. They showed an improvement after the intervention in those skills. They also showed enhanced communication and self-direction, so conceptual and social adaptive functioning skills. And they also improved in self-determination. Self-determination is sort of this core concept that entails being able to goal set, to plan, to initiate, and to advocate for yourself. The participants now who completed the intervention reported a stronger belief in their ability to access social supports in times of stress. So not only accessing their family, but knowing that they can turn to friends when they're feeling stressed or when they need help, and using that as a coping mechanism. So really getting them to shift away from fully being reliant upon their family and shifting more into autonomy and seeing it's important to have a larger social network in your life. And so I'm just going to take 1 minute to have you listen to some of these clips before I wrap up my part. And these are clips, we did a focus group at the end, and this is what participants said about the program.
I learned how to address problems like at the time, and remain calm and function well if there's a change in the day or the plan. Just kind of how to realistically think about things. It'll take some more practice, but at least I was able to be aware of when I was in a thinking trap or something. and that maybe there's another way to think about it.
So you can see how she was identifying that she has thinking traps, and she can become aware of them in the moment and to start coping with it in the moment. But it's still a skill that she's developing, right? So these are skills that take time to develop. And here's the last quote.
I think the biggest thing that I learned from this lesson was how to identify who actually can be a friend, because while someone might be friendly, they may not be a good friend. Like if they start asking for money or they start asking you to borrow their stuff, and you start getting little red flags because they're not giving you anything back. It just helps identify when you can cut off a relationship if it's not going well, if it's not going to be a good friendship, and knowing when someone can actually become a good friend, because you can tell if you can actually trust them with your stuff and your life.
So walking away with an understanding about friendships is really critical, because as we know, many individuals on the spectrum are targeted. They are taken advantage of by people. So for them to be able to identify red flags in someone as maybe not being genuine is a really important skill to have in adult life. So with that, I'm actually going to move this on to Steve Reuter, and he's going to now talk about the social coach part of the intervention.
My role with Access was to act as the facilitator for the social coach group. And as Tasha said, the majority of the social coaches were in fact parents. We did have a few non-parents who were part of our groups. And so if I slip in and start to refer to the social coaches as parents, just forgive me for that. One of the things as Tasha had pointed out, is that social coaches were given the same curriculum and in the same way as the participants. And this was really significant because as a large part of this intervention was in terms of helping people to reduce anxiety and develop better coping skills. And for parents or for parents or people who are very involved in the support of the life of people who are on the spectrum, that can be a very stressful situation for them. And so developing some of these awarenesses and skills was very significant for the coaches. They also did complete all the life practice exercises along with the participants. And one of the things that we really needed to explain was the fact that we wanted them to complete the life practice, not envisioning how that affected their partners, but how it affected themselves. People were so conditioned to always be thinking about how to support their participants that they were forgetting the importance of the self-care for themselves. So that was a very significant thing that we worked on with the coaches, was to think about how these practices actually affected them. The social coaches also met very intentionally with the participants 3 times during the week. As Tasha said, there were 6 life practice activities that people completed. But given the fact that our lessons were once a week for an hour and a half, and we did have a significant amount of information that was covered during each lesson, we needed to extend that so that it became not just something that people understood intellectually, but that they could apply it to their lives. And so the social coaches were very instrumental with helping people to see when they were experiencing situations that our techniques would be valuable for, and how to apply that directly to make an impact, to actually make the change, and not just understand the concept. The coaches also were encouraged to apply these techniques to themselves and to share at a very different level than some of the coaches had been traditionally sharing with their partners. When you are in a very strong caregiving role with someone, you're oftentimes still acting in a very immature kind of relationship where you can be very directive and you may not be sharing your full humanity with your partner because you're in that parent kind of role. And so having the opportunity for people to broaden how they interacted with people was very helpful. One of the things that I've experienced in the work that I do with families, and this goes way back, is that many families feel that their skills and their contributions and their commitment that they provide is not honored and respected by professionals, and that goes back to within the schools and with other types of times that they've come in contact with professionals. And so one of the things that I was very aware of and tried to convey to families was that our curriculum and me as a facilitator really understood that families did come in with significant strengths, and that many of the things that we were introducing were in fact building on many of the techniques that they maybe have already been using. We also really honored and told the social coaches that their role in terms of continuing those lessons throughout the week, that was a very significant part of making the changes that would be effective. And the final thing was that although we did cover the same material as the participants did in their group, we were oftentimes able to do that a little bit more efficiently, which gave us some time to extend some of the group process and allow parents to share their experiences, both struggles that they were having, as well as the positive things that were happening, and to share and to ask each other what are the techniques that they have had success with. And so again, to really recognize that we did not have all the answers, and that many times the parents actually had experienced the same thing, as they had some excellent suggestions. And so these were all things that I think were really helpful for the parents to really feel that their contribution was being respected. Within the groups, our social coaches reported that they often assisted participants regularly, if not daily, with very high-level prompting for regular tasks. And when I mean high-level prompting, I'm oftentimes talking about verbal reminders, which really don't allow people to develop independence. With a verbal reminder, you have to be there and the other person has to be there. And so that's a very high-level prompt if that's the way that you're encouraging people or directing people. They also reported assisting people regularly with just planning of events in their life, giving frequent reminders, helping to process events in their life and helping them to reinterpret, and also de-escalating when people were in crisis. They spent a lot of time with that. A few coaches reported engaging in regular self-care, and many of the Access coaches expressed concerns about how participants were going to be successful when the coaches were no longer able to provide the high-level supports that they were currently, as they aged and eventually died, how people were going to be successful after that. The one thing that was another stress for social coaches was the fact that very few of the coaches said that they had relationships with other parents who were in their similar situations. And so one of the values of Access was allowing, just as with the participants, making friendships and making relationships that would hopefully continue past the group. The coaches also formed relationships that would allow that to happen. And so that was a surprise to me, actually, that the coaches did not have those types of relationships. When you put this all together and you think about the demands that are listed on the screen here, you can see that this is really a very, very stressful situation for people. When people are spending this much time with the support and guidance, it can be very stressful for parents. And that's certainly something that's borne out in research. Research shows that parents who have offspring who are on the spectrum, they certainly have higher levels of stress than parents who have typically developing children. And there's some other research that shows that in comparison with parents who have children who are on the spectrum, they can have more stress and more anxiety, more depression, and also more concerns about the future success of their offspring as they develop than parents who have children with other developmental disabilities. So what we saw within our group is very, very much reflected within the research. The awareness of what we saw, the first rule for social coaches was that they needed to apply this material to their own lives, to not just take this information and again think about how they were going to use this on their sons or daughters or with their partners, but also that they needed to reduce their own stress and improve their own self-care. One of the things that we emphasize within the group is that the interventions that we were teaching were not just designed to reduce stress in the moment when you were in crisis, but that we really wanted people to work on reducing their baseline anxiety. Because if you start off with your baseline anxiety at a very high level, and then you're involved with something that's an additional stress, then you tend to react in very reactive ways. I don't know how to say that differently, but you tend to be very reactive, and you don't. It's very difficult to do things in a very supportive and helpful way, as compared to if you start off with a very low level of anxiety and then you have a stress. At that point, you're operating with a lot more reserves, and so you're able to be a lot more thoughtful and helpful in your responses. The other thing was the fact that we really wanted for coaches to work on equalizing the coach and participant relationship. We'll talk about that in a second. This is my "you can't fix lazy" slide. And what I mean by that is that one of the things we really wanted to work on people was to view the experiences of people that they were supporting from a proper lens and a proper framework. Many people who are on the spectrum, when you ask them, have you ever been called lazy, you will get a very, very strong response of yes. And it's really an issue of not understanding how much anxiety can lock people down from engaging in activities. So if people slide into seeing people, their participants not assisting with things around the house, not getting things done, and you see that as being lazy, then you're, as a supporter or as a coach, the way that you're going to naturally experience that is through feeling frustrated and resentful. You'll also tend to have more reactionary responses to that situation, and you won't think that you need to provide tools. The idea with lazy is simply you need to do better. You need to get yourself out there, but you're not providing tools to allow people to do that. On the participant level, the way that you're going to experience that same thing is it's going to increase your anxiety because you're just being told you're not doing enough. And so without the tools, then they are just feeling that they are failing. And as if that's the response that they're having, then that will tend to lead to future avoidance and failure within the future. And that also reinforces people's poor self-image that they have. Now, if you take the same situation where someone's not engaging in the house or engaging with activities outside the house, and you can see it through the lens that people do not have the tools that they need, then that's going to lead to more a reaction of compassion and optimism, because you can fix that. If people don't have tools, you can provide tools, and you can be more strategic in your responses. And then you are thinking what tools would be beneficial for this individual. On the participant level, this is going to lead to reduced anxiety because they're feeling understood and respected. With proper tools, they can begin to approach situations and build on their successes. And that will lead to an increase in self-esteem and reinforces people in the future with engaging with other activities. So these are kind of, just a table of some tools that kind of match up. So when people are in situations to where they're feeling stress, then they can use relaxation tools. If they're avoiding situations, the relaxation techniques as well, but also the small steps tools. Many times, if you haven't thought about this, you're saying, okay, you've used some relaxation tools, now get out there and get your job. And what we really emphasize with the coaches is the fact that oftentimes people need to take very incremental and small steps, and that those activities should be affirmed and celebrated, even if they weren't necessarily successful. Engagement in itself should be celebrated. If people have distorted thinking, then using the thinking trap tool and the best, most likely tool that Tasha explained. And if people really are not able to do things, not so much out of anxiety or in combination with anxiety, but with executive functioning skills in terms of planning, organizing, sequencing, prioritizing, then there are ways of reducing those direct prompts, those high-level prompts that I talked about earlier, through visual schedules, support plans, and technology. So we really wanted to provide parents and coaches with the ability to look at things in a more realistic way and provide the appropriate tools when needed. This is my final point, which is that access, one of the goals, in addition to just simply reducing anxiety and to allow people to engage more, was to evolve the relationship between the coaches, particularly parents, and their children. You think about the way that this typically happens with typically developing children. As they get into young adulthood, they begin to drive, to date, to get jobs, to move out. And those are all things that allow the people who are experiencing those, the developing adult, to develop increased awareness, increased responsibility, increased knowledge. And it also, for the parents, it reinforces the fact that people are moving forward and that you can step back in your parenting role and develop a more mature relationship. When people are frozen and they are not moving forward and they're disengaged at home, they're disengaged from work, then that's really not something that's going to, where the parents are going to be able to say, I can see that this person is making advancements, and I can therefore start to withdraw and to allow more independence, to encourage more independence, and encourage more responsibility. So one of the things that I believe that we saw within this was that as people started to do, as Tasha said, that social coaches started to recognize that people were doing more around the house. Many people who came into Access, one of the requirements of Access was that you needed to have a volunteer role or be working or in school. And for people who came into Access who did not have any of those engagements, simply starting that engagement of taking on one of those roles was something that really helped the parents, again, to see some successes and to realize that they could start to back off of the intensive support and prompting that they were providing. I think I mentioned this a little earlier, is the fact that through the conversations that people had, particularly as they were processing the information between our lessons and sharing the life practice with each other, it really did encourage new ways of interacting between the social coaches and the participants. It built a higher level of mutual respect. It moved parents from the role of giving direction to guidance, which is a very important thing within a maturing parent-child relationship. And it also led to higher expectations. There's one final slide, which has some clips.
A shared experience, because I know for me, for a long time, I felt really isolated with having a daughter that's autistic and has difficulties making friendship.
I like the emphasis on the positive thinking, both me and my son.
I liked the fact that there was meaningful problem solving, that it wasn't limited to positive thinking, that there were also, especially with the life practice, that you were working through realistic, these young adults often encounter in their real lives, and they were coming out with meaningful solutions based on their own experiences. They worked through it.
And our last clip.
So I thought that the whole life practice model was really useful. There were several times that I looked at the life practice and kind of presupposed that I knew how the response was going to go, what the feedback was going to be, and was very much surprised. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me to not be too, assumptive with regards to how things roll, and to actually listen and pay a little bit more attention.
So with that, this is the end of our presentation tonight. We're going to now take the table.
Okay, so we're going to start off with a very practical question. Actually, two questions. When is the next Access program available, and is it accepting participants?
Good news and bad news. The good news is we are going to have the Access program again this year. Last year it was funded by a grant, so it was free. This year it'll hopefully be vendorized by regional center or be offered on a fee-for-service basis. And most of our groups start around November, December. If you would like to get on the waiting list for it, you should go online and look for Sarah Madavi's phone number. I don't know it offhand, but she is our social skills program and access program coordinator, and she can put you on the waiting list.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, is there any kind of program for adults that are more nonverbal and intellectually challenged?
Not for adults, but we do. Cognitive behavioral therapy requires a certain level of language, abstract thinking, and so it's not really a treatment of choice for people who don't have that level of ability. Behavioral therapy is at this point considered to be really more of a treatment of choice. We have a grant proposal outstanding to try to work more towards implementing CBT, BT in a lower intellectual functioning group, but those are children. And our student, Jan, who's with us from Singapore, is actually very interested in this particular question and is busily reviewing the literature because it's an incredible unmet need. And so we are starting, and hopefully our grant proposal will be funded. We'll start with children, working with some colleagues at UCLA who do have a manualized treatment that can be used in people who have lower levels of intellectual functioning and language.
So here's the next question then. And we have a lot of questions, so I apologize if we kind of jump through these. Will there still be co-leaders needed for the next Access program, and how, if so, how do people volunteer to be co-leaders?
Maybe we can start a list if people want to do it. And Terry, do you guys have some support back there? Maybe you could help collect a list of the people who want to be leaders of the next Access program. That was one thing I don't think we really said, but that we've done Access a couple of times now, and so some of the people from the first session were wonderfully helpful as volunteer leaders in the second session. So some of the participants actually became leaders, which is another wonderful aspect of the program, I think.
So maybe people could leave both their phone number and their email and their names for that.
Terry back there has a list.
Terry back there near
Terry
the
is blonde-haired
drinks.
with, she's
Okay.
wearing black.
Okay.
And just to add to that, if you want to contact Sarah Madabi too, she could also put you on that list. Or if you know someone who might be interested, you can share her phone number with.
So the next question, I'm going to editorialize a little bit on this question. So, I mean, the program is really, it's a wonderful program focused on giving skills to individuals on the autism spectrum and their families. And so many families of teenagers and young adults are concerned about employment. So the other part of this equation is the employer. So where do we find sympathetic employers is the question.
That's a really good question. And one of the, as Len mentioned earlier, is I work with the Business Advisory Council, which is a combination of all the supported employment agencies in our area. One of the first things that we really focused on was not trying to think about not trying to think about this as being a sympathy situation. We're really trying to emphasize the fact that people who have disabilities are oftentimes uniquely gifted in certain areas, and the fact that we need to approach businesses from that model of the gifts and strengths that people have. With that said, if the person's receiving services from the regional center as they get to the age that they are ready for an employment, Sacramento, if you're in the Sacramento region, we have a number of exceptional supported employment agencies. And one of the things, and we're seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of people who are hired by businesses as we approach within the right framework.
So is there evidence of sustained transference of learned skills from the program to real-world settings? So do we, I guess the question is have we had an opportunity yet to have data on how the graduates are doing?
So we don't have long-term follow-up data. It would be really wonderful to have. We have anecdotal data. We still keep in touch with several of the participants, and we've seen some of them, and some have progressed. Just off the top of my head, I know some that have gone on to obtain jobs and in careers that they're really excited about, that fits their skill set well. So it's not just a job that pays, but it's actually a job they enjoy as well. We have seen progress too, just in home setting, taking on more responsibilities at home, engaging in the community more, continuing their volunteer position, even though they're not required to do it anymore, and seeking out new volunteer positions. Does anything else come to mind? So just based on what participants and their family members have told us, we've seen some continued success in these participants that way.
Good, thank you. So do you have any tools for gauging kind of developmental level and kind of where a person is so that you can individualize how they participate, both for the participants and the coach, so you can kind of gauge where they're at and help them progress to the next level, recognizing that people may be at different levels in terms of where they are in skills and needs?
I think in terms of being a parent or a social coach, you might be a grandparent or whoever you might be, to the individual on the spectrum, it's important to observe how they're performing. We talked again about small steps. We have a few lessons that really focus on that. It's pretty surprising. Most of us expect others to take very large leaps. So like, here's your goal, we'll go straight to that goal. And breaking it down into small steps is actually not only a difficult skill for someone on the spectrum to learn, it's a difficult skill for most people to learn. And so to kind of understand that it's probably going to be a learning process for you as well. And it's always a changing target, meaning they're learning new skills and they're growing each day and week. And so then you have to kind of readjust your understanding of them and what you can help them learn next week or move forward. So it's, but I would say pay attention to how, set a small goal, see if they're successful and they reach that goal. If they do, that's wonderful. Set another goal that's just a bit beyond that. So you really want to kind of scaffold it and build it up. However, if you set a small goal and they don't reach that, don't see that as a sign they can never do it. See that as a sign you need to now break that down into smaller steps. And if you're having a hard time figuring out how to break that down, talk to someone else about it. They can help you kind of problem solve. Talk to the individual on the spectrum. A lot of times, too, we make assumptions about why they didn't do that well. And you could be quite off the mark on why it was difficult for them or why they didn't succeed. So even having conversations around it and encouraging conversations, I think a lot of times they feel defeated. They don't want to talk about it, why it didn't go well, and it's hard for them to even understand why it didn't. So even helping them kind of just think through that can be a great learning experience. And pay attention, they might have a thinking trap too, so that could be part of it. And you can see the slides again if you want to review those.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have one final question and then a card that has a comment. And so this question, I think, reflects kind of a general tension that we all feel sometimes about how to treat individuals and each other. So what would you say to an autism advocate who might view the Access program as an attempt to fit individuals with ASD into a neurotypical model?
I think we try really hard in our groups to never say that anyone has to do anything. So, I mean, the goal of our groups is to teach some potential skills that may help people in their lives as they define them. So, stress and coping, we're just teaching tools, and if these aren't the tools you want or you need, don't adopt them, don't come to the program. So it's, you know, I think we're not telling anyone how to live their lives, or when we teach work rules saying that they need to behave in a certain way if they don't want to. But we are putting things out there that they can hopefully find useful in one form or another in their lives.
We also talk often about goal setting, and specifically them defining their own goals. We never define goals for them, and we're very clear with the social coaches to try to stand back and let the young adult define the goal for themselves. And that can be very hard because often the coach has defined those goals ever since the child was very young. And so this is really an important step for the parent too, to learn how to empower their child to identify their own goals and reach them. And so I think, you know, being able to kind of set goals is important for all people, but deciding what goal is right for you, only you can do that. No one else can tell you how to do that.
Okay, good. All right, so I fibbed. There's one more question that came in, and then I'll read the last comment. So when can we expect a publication on the results of Access so we can share that?
Well, I have to give big kudos to Tasha for having gotten that first draft of the manuscript already to the co-authors. So we're looking at them now, the comments now, and we'll be submitting the manuscript, I would think, relatively soon. And then it's with the gods of manuscripts, and we'll have to pick the right journal to send it to. We have some good ideas, and keep in touch, because hopefully within the year, it'll be out there for you. Yeah.
And we would definitely put it on our website, a link to on the website when it's available.
Thank you, Len. We will do that. Yeah.
Okay, so then the last is just a comment. Bravo on all presentations, great information. Thank you for all you do for us. So thank you to the presenters and to the audience.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.